Well, thank you to everyone, and yes, so thanks for joining us on this introduction to our first of five of the building blocks of PPM webinar series. This session is called Project Intake and Prioritization, and in this session we're going to focus on the first of as what we call the 5 building blocks of PPM. Now, let me go into just a little bit of background around myself and our company. I am a principal consultant here at Sensei Project Solutions, and I have been working at various clients of ours throughout the United States and Canada doing both project and process work. I've been a Microsoft Certified Professional and have served with several different partners working at Microsoft Project Server deployments, particularly those that focus on improving the project and process management of an organization, and also do training and deployments and various add-on products as well too. So in addition to having a team full of folks who are certified on using the various Microsoft technologies, we also focus on practice standards and industry recommendations from various groups, Gartner groups and such, for best practices on project deployment. So we incorporate into our deployment the principles of good, sound project management practices. So how is it that we help our clients? Well, we do things with standard deployment services of Project PPM. We do ongoing services. We do typically role-based training and such, coaching and mentoring. And we also do things that we call sort of a jumpstart solutions, that's sort of a project in a box, if you will, that provides people with a pre-configured environment of Microsoft Project Server, and also the report packs that add on to the out-of-the-box reports that are available with Microsoft Project Server. And in fact, some of the things that you're going to be seeing today come from our Jumpstart solution are our report packs as well. So I mentioned that this is one in a series of 5 building blocks. So let me just explain and kind of set the stage for what all this is about, these different building blocks. So the building blocks of PPM represent what we consider to be the most common scenarios or business processes that people are trying to solve a problem by implementing Project Server. And we focus on solving a business problem, not really so much just implementing a particular technology. So within these building blocks are really the tools, the techniques, the configuration options, the best practices that go into solving a business problem. So really, these are what we call the heart and soul of something called proactive scheduling. So before going through each of the different boxes here in detail, let me take just a moment and kind of set the stage of what we mean by what we talk about proactive scheduling. Okay, so let me use kind of an analogy here of getting to a particular place I want to get to on a map. And really, this is use this as an analogy to any of the things that we're trying to accomplish here, whether it's a project manager, a resource manager, executives who are trying to get to a particular business goal. In years gone by, you might have printed directions like I have in the past with a printed map and take it with me on my route. The problem with that, as all of you know, is that as soon as there's traffic or congestion or I have to take detours, I no longer have a picture of where I'm at and where I need to be. So most of us have moved on to GPS systems or something on our phone that helps us navigate the direction we want to go to. And I want to use this as an analogy for what how GPS system relates to project scheduling, particularly proactive scheduling. So when you have a static schedule, just like a static map, you've hard-coded dates, you've put in fixed information. It's not flexible. You may hang it up on the wall and say this is where we're going, but it quickly can become out of date. So the better alternative is to have a system where we continuously collect actuals and continually refresh our effort to complete and use this as a way to get an accurate picture of where are we today and where do we need to go to get to our solution, because it may be, it may be different than where it was when we left our original station. Okay, so that's the difference, a static picture of a schedule versus the idea of a proactive schedule where we are moving towards our goal with more accurate estimations for effort to complete. Okay, so let's talk about now the different building blocks here. Let me open up sort of the first of these building blocks. The first of these is the one we're going to spend most of our time on today, but let me take just 30 seconds or a minute on each of these different building blocks. So the project intake and prioritization. Many organizations will move to a project service solution just for this one particular building block alone. In a lot of organizations, requests come in through email or they come in through other systems where they're collected, but you really don't have a way to categorize, prioritize, determine which of these different project proposals, project requests should be moved forward. So the practice of project intake and prioritization is all about categorizing the requests, determining how they align with our business, and then determining which ones we're going to move forward with. So that's where we'll spend the bulk of today on. The other areas are resource capacity and demand management. This is another area where people will implement Project Server just for this one capability alone. So this is where we take our resource capacity. We may have, say, for example, 18 full-time equivalent developers on our staff, but we've got project demand that is 20, 25 different resources with that particular skill set. So resource capacity and demand management is how we balance out what our supply is and what the demand is and make decisions both strategically and tactically for how we're going to accomplish our project. Cost and budgeting cost tracking is the third then of our building blocks. And this is where we come up with an accurate estimates to start off the project, and we lock it down with a baseline. And then as the project moves forward, we track against that baseline so we can quickly determine if we're going off and if so, make corrective actions early while there's still time to do something about it on your project. Then project planning and collaboration is all about integrating the pieces of your project, like the scope, the business case, along with budget, the resources it's going to take to produce the schedule, deadlines, constraints. All these different things work together, both in terms of, this is what you think classically of the project desktop scheduling engine, plus SharePoint on the back end to be able to keep track of the additional things like issues and risks and things that we use to collaborate on projects. Okay, then the last area here is with this project status and portfolio reporting. And this is where if we are tracking actuals and variances to date, we can track progress on an individual project. And an individual project may look like it's doing well or may look like it's just slightly over. But what this information rolls up to on a server is it rolls up to portfolio level reporting, where for performance of the entire portfolio can be measured. And you can say, okay, we may be doing okay or just slightly over on a few projects, but when we look at them in aggregate across an entire portfolio, we begin to see we've really got some bottlenecks and we need to adjust our resourcing or we need to adjust our cost estimates and such. So, and this is a very common thing when people move from using, say, MPP files for tracking their projects to a server-based environment where this information can be rolled up through the project server database. Okay, so that was a very quick run-through of each of the different building blocks of PPM. Now we're going to talk about the area that we're going to spend today on, which is project intake and prioritization specifically. So project intake is, as I mentioned in the introduction, it's all about capturing that collection of incoming proposals, business requests that may be sort of unstructured and ill-formatted and unable to quantify. And we put them into a central repository, and we collect for each of those. We collect a business case. We may be coming up with high-level staffing requirements so that you can determine, do we have the staff to accomplish this request? Coming up with high-level estimates of cost. Proposing, if it's appropriate, going ahead and proposing the start and finish dates for a project. You may be estimating or forecasting when we would like to at least have a go-live date for this project. And then as well, strategic alignment. How does this project align with our strategy for where we want to go as a business? So these are not inflexible. These are just a few of the things that people would typically collect as new project requests or new proposals come into the system. So now, not all projects are the same. You would have different types of information be classified based upon the type of project that you're working with. So in this case, here are several different types of projects. Actually, I'm going to skip over the project types for just a second here, enterprise project types. I'm going to come back to this in just a minute. So the first item that I talked about that you might want to collect might be a business case. So a business case, in a lot of organizations, you'll have a form, a paper-based form that people will fill out in order to collect information about a project request. And rather than doing this in a paper-based system, Project Server allows us to collect this in electronic form that is customizable, that can be tuned to the requirements not only of the business, globally across the business, but also specific to the type of project that we're performing. So if we're doing, say, a marketing campaign for a particular business, we may have a different set of things that we're collecting versus if we're doing, say, a software development project where we're developing a new piece of software versus, say, a break-fix software situation where we have to fix something that's broken. We're going to collect different types of information and different levels of detail of information about the business case for each of those. So, and you're going to see this when we move into the software here. You're going to see how this form is customizable. So different types of project types will dictate the different business cases that we put in front of someone to fill out for a new project request. So things like a problem statement, expected benefits, proposed costs, all of these things would be potential candidates to be collected based upon the type of project request that we have coming in. Okay, so a little bit about resource planning then. One of the other things that we'll collect might be the resource plan for how many full-time equivalent resources or how many hours per day, per week, per month that we're asking for a particular type of resource. And this may not be so necessary for the small things like a break-fix project, but for the larger projects, certainly for doing our resource capacity planning that we'll talk about it in another one of these building block sessions, this information will become very crucial to us to be able to determine can we move forward with a project or not. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about workflows. I'm doing this in a PowerPoint. You'll see this actually slightly different once we get into the software, but the PowerPoint here helps me to describe a couple of different scenarios in high-level visibility here. So let's talk about a couple different types of workflows. Most organizations, or a lot of organizations, will have sort of a major workflow and a minor workflow. A major workflow is one that requires some additional governance, and a minor workflow is much lighter. I used the example earlier of a software break-fix project versus a full software development project versus, say, a marketing campaign or something like that. So the larger the project effort and the higher the risk, the more governance workflow is necessary on the project. So in our case here, we might have for a very simple project, we might have the project is simply requested. It may go through a departmental review where the head of a department reviews it, and then once it's approved, it immediately goes into execution, and then finally into closure. Whereas for a larger project where there's higher risk or there may be more people involved, for those we want to go through a more rigorous governance workflow to manage the requests through the life cycle of the project. So from a business case, where you saw me collecting information on a business case form and also the costs and benefits and the resource requirements and such, and then go through from there to a departmental review, similar type of a departmental review, but from there it may go through, say, to a steering committee review. And for steering committee may ask for additional information. They may have, a more strategic. They may be determining not only is this a go or a no-go, but is this something that's going to take place this quarter, 6 months, this calendar year, fiscal year, and such. So additional levels of review that go on in the more rigorous workflow. Then we'll go into the detailed planning, and why we call this detailed planning here is that when we're first submitting the business case, we may not want to expend at that point a lot of energy into determining the nth degree of detail of how many tasks are going to be in the work breakdown structure, or the exact dates that certain phases are going to start and finish. We really want to get to the place where we can get to a departmental review or a steering committee review fairly quickly so that they can make their determinations as to whether this is a starter or non-starter project. And then once we've reached that point, now the steering committee approves it to move forward into a detailed planning phase. And during a detailed planning phase, we will go into the lower levels of drilling down in the work breakdown structure to the level that we can accurately estimate the true cost. At that point, once we have a baseline plan, we will probably then go into a baseline plan review where, okay, we had originally estimated maybe this was a $500,000 project, but once we detailed out the planning, we then determined it's more like $750,000 to do this project. So we may have an additional review point there to determine, now that we really know the true cost of it, does it still make sense to move forward with this? Is the return on investment what we thought it was going to be? Is it still aligned with the direction that we want to go as a business? And then from there we go into execution. And when I say execution, here's where I'm talking about we're actually executing on the work breakdown structure of your Microsoft project schedule. And then finally in the project closer and closeout and review and such. Okay, so those are a couple of the different types of workflows, major and minor. Certainly you're not restricted to those two. We just, in our practices, most organizations need at least two flavors on their menu so that when they're choosing the type of project, the different projects can use one of these two workflows. And the different types of projects I mentioned earlier, software projects, marketing projects and such, these workflows would be reusable across the different types of projects. Okay, another thing that we would look at as we're collecting information to make a decision about a project would be business drivers, sort of where does this project fit in with strategic alignment with our business. And this is where we have taken the time with the management of the company to determine where we want to go as a business and then assess how well a particular project request is going to fit with that proposed or with that strategy for our business. So here we've identified several different examples here, like expanding into new market segments, improving customer satisfaction scores, increasing market share in our existing markets. And so each of the different projects can be scored based upon how they fit with us as a business. Now, this, as you probably can tell, this adds some objectivity to what otherwise might be a more subjective measure of why do I do project A over project B? Well, clearly if a project is going to increase our expansion into new markets or increase our market share in our existing markets, if it's going to give us strong results in those areas, then I have objective data for which to determine project A is going to get moved forward and project B is going to have to wait its turn in line. So again, this is one of the drivers that we're going to use, or one of the areas that we'll use for scoring our projects as we move it into, move it forward in the path towards execution. Okay, I'm going to also be showing you a little bit, I'll come back to this in a bit, but proposals by governance phase so that we can see where we sit in the project, where we sit in the life cycle of a project, how many projects we have in the proposal stage, how many in the selection stage, how many days that they've been sitting in that stage, start and finish date, estimated cost, estimated works in terms of hours. So this is some additional reporting that can be done. This is actually one of the reports that we provide as part of our Jumpstart solution and our report packs to augment the reporting that comes out of the box of the project, to be able to see what's coming up in the pipeline and to be able to filter that information. Okay, so let me take a moment here. I'm going to back out of this for just a moment here, and pardon me here while I jump to my screen. All right, so let's see how this looks inside the Project Server system. I'm now into Project Server 2013. Those of you who may have seen earlier versions will notice that the look and feel of this is a little bit different. But the overall structure is similar. We've got information about projects and approvals and tasks, issues, risks, resources, and strategy and such. And I'll be going through parts of these here as we move forward through this presentation. Okay, so the main thing I'm going to focus on just now is the project repository. We've been talking about how projects can be requested and go into a request system here. So I'm looking at here a collection of different projects. When I say collection, meaning those that are in a proposal state, those that are in a selection state. And this is just one of several different views that we can have here. Project 2013 gives us a nice ability to be able to show these project requests in sort of a Gantt-style view here, where I'm looking at not just the projects. Each of these line items is representing not just a task within a project, but an entire project itself. And then I can represent the ones that require the key focus. I can put those in a high-level portfolio Gantt chart at the very top here to focus on those that require the most attention. But I'm going to look at some of the different other views in here. Besides this one, in other sessions in this building blocks series, we're going to be talking about other things like managing the execution of projects by their different workflows, those that are in the planning stage and those in the execution stage. But in today's session, we're going to focus on those that are in the proposal stage. So we have quite a number of projects here that are in a proposal and a few that are in the selection stage here. So let me just talk about the mechanics of these and how this is working. So the way that a project can get into the system here is across the top dashboard here. Those who've been granted access to get to the system can simply click on the New button, and it drops down a list of different project types. So I alluded to these earlier here, how we can have different types of projects that can be created in the system. And so like here I used software development as an example, maybe an infrastructure project, maybe other types of enterprise projects that we're tracking against and such here too. So the different types of project, the choices that I make here for my project requests will determine several different things about my project request. And so classifying the request into each of these different types not only puts it in the dashboard for me where I can see the different types, but it also allows me to supply different information to the projects when I'm filling out the business case. So for example, let me just go in here and we'll just choose an infrastructure project. So if I'm going in and filling out a request for a new infrastructure project, you can see across the type here, the guidance that's given to me is this project request form is used to submit a request, a simple request for up to 300 hours and less than 2 months in duration. Okay, so there's some guidance to the person filling this out. If that doesn't fit my project, I'm better off choosing one of the other types here. So I'm going to suppose here that I'm going to build something that's like a dashboard, corporate dashboard development project. And I'm not going to take time to fill out the description here, but you can see the simple types of things. These would be the kinds of things that you might get in an email. You might get this information in a request that says, you know, hey, we've been thinking about this in our executive meetings here. What would it take to be able to produce a system that is an executive dashboard that does whatever things it is? So you can see that something that might have started in an email and has no structure to it can immediately begin to start gaining some structure. Things like, okay, how is this going to benefit the business? Is this to run the business? Is this to grow the business? Is this to transform the business in some way? So we have a categorization of our investment strategy. And then departments who's requesting this project, whether it's engineering, finance, IT, and such, so on. And then an owner for the project. Now this is the simplest of request forms here that might match a simple workflow. I'm actually going to show you a different one here for one that's already been developed here. Go ahead and leave that page and come back into one of these others here. So here's a project. This one is a database builder project, and this has a little more substance to it here. Okay, and this has similar here. I'll go into the workflow in just a moment, but this has a similar business case request form here, and I'll just show you the mechanics of this again here as well too. So here's a project where I've put in a description for it, and the department that's requesting it, and some dates and such, investment category, and a sponsor and such. The owner. Now here, because this is a more rigorous project that requires more information to be collected for its business case, here we've required that people supply a problem statement and a statement of expected benefits that we believe that we will achieve as part of the project, a high-level proposal of the costs, and a proposed go-live date for this project. Okay, so, and again, this information are the types of things that an organization would want to customize for their needs, and very typically take a paper-based system that people are used to filling out a paper form and turn that into an electronic form where we'll define custom fields here to collect the information that you would require. Okay, so we also have the ability to request some additional information about the project, like I mentioned earlier, 2 different areas here. One would be a resource plan. Now, for a high-level project, we may not know the work breakdown structure. We may not know the detail that's going to be required for a project. And again, the purpose of this is with a relatively light amount of effort, we should be able to come up with some high-level ranking of this project without having to build a detailed work breakdown structure. So we would talk to our subject matter experts and say, it looks like we need a business analyst, and we need a DBA, and we need a developer and such here on this project. And for the duration of the project, maybe the business analysts we need, and this type of information can be, either in full-time equivalents, or it can be hours, or it can be days for a particular time period. And the time period can be either weeks or months or quarters, but typically months and full-time equivalents is probably the most commonly used value. So this says at the beginning, first month of the project, we're expecting approximately a quarter of a business analyst. That ramps up for the second month of the project to 3/4 of a full-time equivalent, and then that trails off to nothing for the rest of the duration of the project. Similarly, for these other areas over here for a developer, maybe we're starting with just a quarter of a full-time equivalent, and then that steps up a bit for the middle of the project, and then that ramps down towards the end of the project. So this is, if it's in a very simple spreadsheet form, gives us the ability to capture the resource demand for this project, so we can make some determinations as we move forward as to whether or not we have the capacity to be able to pull this project off. And is this rigorously detailed here? No, at this point it's really not, but it is enough information that we can make some determinations about whether we have the capacity within our organization to actually carry out this project. Okay, and once we've defined a resource plan, we may tell project that we want to use this resource plan for determining the resource availability, or we may say, no, we've actually built a project schedule where we've detailed out a work breakdown structure. In that project schedule, we want to collect the resources on the detailed task. Or we could use a hybrid here that says use the resource plan up until a particular fixed date, and then from that date forward, then I would choose to use just the resource plan for the balance of the project here. So a lot of flexibility there. Again, the goal is to be able to collect with fairly minimal effort and a high-level profile of what this project looks like, so that we can make a determination as to whether to move forward or not. All right, so let me close out of this for just a second here. All right, so one other key area that we're interested in collecting about project proposals as they come in, and I mentioned this before, I'll just show you the mechanics, is that as we're filling out a new project request, we will score the project in terms of how well it meets with these different business objectives. Then again, I'll show you how these business objectives are defined in a little bit, but for the time being, this just simply says, where do we fit within scoring these different projects? As far as improving customer scores, we're strong. In terms of increasing our market share, we're also strong. And it really helps to have quantifiable numbers here to say that based upon our estimates, we're going to improve market share by 7 to 15% here. So we're no longer just using subjective information for how one project gets moved forward and another project stays behind. We really do have some objective way to be able to say why are we choosing the project set that we're moving forward with. Okay, so I've covered the different areas here. I'm just going to discard these changes for the time being, and I'm going to come back to. Oh, I didn't show you the workflow phases. Let me actually jump back in the project for one last thing, and that is in the workflow phases here. Okay, so across the top here you see workflow status here. This is slightly different than what I showed in the PowerPoint, but certainly this is completely customizable, that within the proposal phase here, you can capture an initial business case, and then get sign-off on that business case, and then move forward to selection, and then ultimately to planning. These other later stages here will be things that you'll be seeing in the later building blocks presentations that we'll be doing in weeks and months ahead. Okay, so there's also information about the project site. I'm going to hold off on that because we will be covering that in more detail in a later session. Okay, so the next area is we've collected all these different proposals, and instead of having an inbox in our email that has collected all these information in an unstructured fashion, we now have them in a fairly structured fashion. And you can see right away here that there's a lot of information about the sponsors, and so just looking at the types of information here, having it in a central repository, we're able to do things like, okay, sort and group these by sponsor, or filter them by sponsor, and things like that, so that I can see who it is that's sponsoring the project, who it is that's owning it, maybe if it's a requirement to capture who is funding the project, so additional bits of information, and have it in a central repository here. The views also exist here to be able to see these projects by sponsor as well too, and you'll be seeing as well some of this information in some of the later presentations that we'll be talking about. Okay, so good. So now let's talk about how we move forward with selection. So some of these projects that are in the selection phase, they've maybe been information collected, and then they've been submitted for moving into the selection phase. What we mean by selection phase is most organizations will, on some sort of periodicity, have a annual or semi-annual assessment of what are all the projects that are candidate projects on deck that we could execute. And they'll have a budget cycle, annual budget cycle, and they'll say, which of these projects are we going to move forward with? So whether you do that on a quarterly basis or an annual basis or somewhere in between, the projects that are on deck that are candidates for selection can go through now a business strategy for which of these get filtered and stay behind, which of these move forward. So let's talk a little bit about that. Those different drivers that we talked about for scoring the projects are defined within Project Server in this way. So here we've got 4 of the different business drivers that we talked about, expanding the different markets, improving customer satisfaction and such. And you can see how these can be classified by different departments. The different project requests can be categorized by projects, and different business drivers will apply to different departments. So maybe if we were doing work for a marketing department or an R&D department, we may have different drivers that apply to only projects that are in that department and maybe not to the rest of the organization here. But you can see we have a collection of these different ones. Now, not all of these different drivers are weighted the same. We may have a situation where some drivers are scored higher than others. And that driver process, I won't go into a lot of detail, but let me just talk about here. There's a method for going through these different ones here. These are fixed at the moment, but I'll just talk about these. These different priorities here were scored by interviewing the different C-levels within my organization, the CIOs, CEOs, CTOs of the organization, and scoring these. And this was the consensus view across the decision makers within the organization to say that of these different business drivers, increasing our market share in existing markets is by far our biggest driver. So a project that scores very high in this area is very likely to move forward in our selection process. Whereas those that are down here that are simply reducing expense base or improving customer satisfaction scores are down towards the lower end. Not that they're not important. Everything else being equal, these would be taken into considerations. But as far as the higher ranking business drivers would be these ones about increasing market share and expanding into new markets. Okay, so now let's talk about the portfolio analysis. So portfolio analysis allows me to take all of the different projects that you saw just a few minutes ago in candidate form, in a proposal form, or in a selection stage, and to put them through a modeling tool that allows me to play with these different scenarios and come up with different possibilities for how I want to execute, which of these projects I want to execute. So let me just launch into this for just a moment. Okay, so this is for 2014, which I guess from today's date is maybe a little bit into the future, but we'll still consider them. So, and then this could be done by department as well too. In this case, I'm just going to choose for all departments and instead of filtering for just one. And if I had multiple different prioritization schemes, you saw me with just one there, but if I had multiple different schemes, I could choose which one applies to this modeling scenario. And then I can choose the projects that go into this. Now, right now I have 26 projects in here. Let me just show you the selection on this, so I don't think I'll change any of these. So these are the different projects that are out there right now that are candidates for moving forward here. All the ones that you saw that were in my proposal or selection stage a moment ago. And these can be, as you can tell, these can be filtered. So if I want to just focus on those that are existing projects and a smaller set of those that are candidates, then I can focus on just the ones that I want. But for the time being, I'm just going to keep the set of projects that I have out here for this sample presentation. Okay, I have one more opportunity here to take a look at how they were prioritized. So of the different projects that are out there, you see this database builder project as well as the others, and you can see how these projects scored against each of these different criteria. Now this is compared with just having an email inbox with a lot of project requests. This is a lot of information for me to be able to manage the project proposals and to be able to tell, well, some of these projects are stronger than the others, and you can tell by the color coding of these which ones really should be getting the highest weight. Now, if I just want to now review the priorities of these and say which one scores the highest, this reviewing of priorities gives me a weighted scoring of all of the candidate projects that are out there. So this tells me the highest priority is developing this engine sensor for analyzing for the 2015 autos, and then a warehouse inventory tracking system and all the way down. So if I had nothing else but time and available money, I might choose to just start at the beginning of this set of projects and just work my way down, and when I finish all of these projects and I get to the lower ones, I will have finished everything that I want to do in my portfolio. But I may not have all of these, so it's time to do a little bit of analysis based on cost. So let's take a look at the analyzing of cost. Okay, so this is a display of again, the projects that are candidate projects to be moved forward. And this is a modeling tool. So what I do right here is not going to actually change the projects, but it's going to give me a way to model the candidate projects in a way that I can determine which ones stay and which ones move forward. So just looking at the cost here, I can see across all of these different 26 projects, I have $5.5 million worth of project costs. And if I do all 26 of these projects, that gives me 100% of the business value that I'm looking for, right? But I'm going to say, let's suppose just for the sake of example, I don't really have $5 million. I really just have $3 million. So I'm going to ask project to do some additional calculations for me. So I'm going to say recalculate this for me. And so what it's going to do is to now reassess the projects that are out there. And you can see with $3 million, I can do 16 of my projects, but I still get 83% of my business value based upon that. And you can see this graph that you see below here is a sort of a return on investment. It's actually sort of the reverse of that. It's called the efficient frontier curve, where the very first few projects that I spend, the first dollars that I spend are some very high payback projects or high business value projects. And the further I go into it, the fewer projects get as high a payback or a higher business value. So that's why this curve is showing here. I'm doing pretty good on the curve, actually, getting for the just under $3 million, I'm getting 83.9% of my business value that I'm targeting to get. So not so bad here. And the projects then are listed up on the left side here, the different projects and their priorities that you saw a moment ago, and then also their costs. Now, typically, people ask things here about like, are there other things that I could display in here, like in addition to the proposed costs, could I put in like a return on investment? So certainly you could put in any of the different types of things that you saw when we were collecting on the initial form, like who is the funding organization, or who is the requesting organization, or the location where this project is to be performed. Any of those types of things could be presented here, so that as we're making determinations of that, who makes the cut, we can include that criteria. But what you're seeing here is that some of these projects, like this database builder project, is pretty high benefit, and it's a relatively low cost, whereas some of these other ones here, maybe a higher cost but a lower benefit. The ones that got bumped out, if I just scroll down just a little bit, you can see the ones that got bumped out here. Either they are low business value, or in this case, it might be a moderate or high business value, but it's a very high cost. So the algorithm the project uses here isn't just looking strictly at business value or strictly at cost. It's using a combination of both. Okay, now in my case, I may have some of these things like a defect tracking system that is needed for compliance reasons or other reasons. So it does give you a way to be able to say, I want to force in or force out a particular project under this modeling scenario here. So let's just go with this, and I'm going to recalculate once again. Project is going to analyze and say, well, if that project is to get forced in, as it did, then a few others got forced out. So this develop new Harpo report module or this document library keyword search got moved out as a result. Okay? So now I'm looking at 15 projects, 81% of my business value here. I may choose to actually save this scenario here, and I can take 2 or 3 different scenarios here and then assess them. So as you can see here, this is really allowing me to not only collect, but manage all of the different project requests, and to then determine whether I want to move forward with scenario A or scenario B. I'm just going to save this. I will go ahead and click save on this and call this $3 million with the defect tracking forced in as well here too. Okay, and then I can compare the different scenarios, but I'm going to press forward here just to make sure we cover this in time. So the last area here in my modeling that I want to talk about is the ability to now take a look at, do I have the capacity to be able to actually move forward with these projects? So some of these projects I can move forward with because I have the dollars. Others of these projects may not make the cut simply because I don't have the resources to be able to perform that work. So let me take a look at the details of these different projects, and we can see how this looks in my organization. So across the top of this display, you're looking at the different roles within my organization, and you can see things like the business analysts, the DBAs, the developers. It gives me a way to be able to capture what is my capacity that I have within the organization, and then the supply, if you will, and then across the bottom, the demand here. So when I take a look at here, like some of the projects that didn't make the cut here, this create a marketing collateral for a new credit system or a traffic signal synchronization system and such. These didn't make the cut here, and the reason why would be they didn't have a sufficient number of network developers or network designers or others in here. So here you can see here as well, this database project, much as I'd like to do it, looks like it's going to be short on certain skills in here, like a technical writer during certain months. So then this is, like I say, this is a modeling tool. I'm not actually going to change anything on the project, but I will maybe go in here and just change a proposed start date on one of these projects, like this database builder project. It was originally proposed to start in February. Let's see if we move it out to, say, June or July of that year, and then recalculate here. Then this might move this project forward and such. So you can see in a modeling scenario, I can take these different candidate projects and I can move them around and then determine, now do I have the capacity to be able to perform these different projects. Okay, so let's see. Once this is selected, and I'm now seeing more projects that are in the green here because I've been able to pass more projects past the resource filtering for my project. Okay, so this is what you've been seeing for the last little bit, is a way that we have collected the different projects into the requests as far as proposals, and then move them forward by a governance into selection, And then once they are moved into selection, then to be able to assess them based upon the their costs, based upon their the resource requirements for the project, based upon things like how well they fit strategically with my organization, or other things like the return on investment, any of the different things that I was collecting in my business case for one of these projects. Okay, so let's see, just a couple of other things here then. Let's see. Okay, just looking at my time here, I've got just a couple more things that I'll talk about here. This would be a great opportunity, though, if you've got questions here, to go ahead and start submitting those questions here. And Jennifer, if you can be collecting those for me, then we can cover those toward the end. So let's see, some of the questions that people typically ask about this, are these the only ways that I can collect project requests into the system? No, there's actually not. There's some other ways that you can do this as well, too. You can actually bring in projects that have been requested in just a SharePoint site, and there's different ways of doing that. There's a couple different ways of doing that. We can request a project that has been in project just being managed as a SharePoint site, or project requests that have been just in an idea site. Sometimes people have an idea site where they'll collect different projects here. Let's see if I've got the different projects here. This is a site where I've got some project ideas like build a PTO tracker system, a recycling system, recycling program, updating to a project website. So you can have a project ideas SharePoint site where you request the different projects and you collect maybe a couple of different things like an expected start date, a description, the expected benefits and such. And then this information can be passed along so that when I move these forward into actually creating a project of the different types, then this can be sort of a seed site, if you will, for moving projects into the candidate list of projects. So let's see, other things that people ask is it possible that you can still create projects in using the traditional Microsoft projects schedule, work breakdown structure of Microsoft project schedule, and then move those in? Certainly you can do that as well too. It's just that if you take a project that's created in Microsoft Project and you just import it, you'll still need to make a determination as to which of the types it is and then put it under governance flow. So the best practice really is to initiate new projects using this on-ramping system here, where we choose the type of projects that we are, the types of projects that have been pre-categorized for us, because the selection of this project will give us several different things. It will give us a classification of the project type, and it will also give us a default work breakdown structure if projects, so it's like, say, software projects always follow a particular type, or a high-level structure for the work breakdown structure. And it'll also give us, as you'll see in some of the later sessions, it will give us the ability to create a SharePoint site that is specific to the needs. So if I were doing a marketing campaign, for example, I may want to pre-seed the SharePoint site with content and such. So best practice is always to start the project off by using this method inside of here, or actually to use the ideas, project ideas site, and then bring project requests in from there. Okay, so let's see here. I've covered the kinds of things that you want. Let me just sort of contrast where we've been and where we've now gone to. We have gone from a system where people were getting requests for new project proposals just from email requests, and they've had to manage in a sort of unstructured format to a very structured format here of proposals and selection and projects that have resource demand and as well as scoring against different projects and such. So I'm now going to open this up for requests or questions and answers and see if anyone has the things that I've not covered in enough detail here. Jennifer, any questions?
I do not see any just yet, but let's give everyone just a minute to see if they're going to submit them. Please feel free to submit your questions to the chat window on the lower right-hand side. Thank you.
Okay. I'll just mention a couple of other things while we're waiting here. Some of the things that frequently different people ask is it possible to see some of this information, like we went in here and we did the, for this project, we collected a resource plan that defined what are the different types of projects here, is there a way to be able to see that resource demand across different projects? And there is. There's some different types of custom reports that you can get. Certainly, we've built some enhanced reports. Some of them here might be the different project proposals by governance phase. Let's see here. And a project prioritization scorecard, if you will. So a scorecard here, this is using, those of you who are familiar with this, a SQL reporting services. Gives me a way to be able to generate a report that, because it's in SQL reporting services here, this type of report could be delivered to an executive within the company on a weekly or monthly basis to show, here's the different projects that we have, here's where they stand in terms of where they are in their workflow, and where they are in terms of business driver and their overall probability of moving forward. So types of things that you could do with filtering for sponsor, filtering for who the project manager is and such, and then departments and such too. So a couple of nice ways to be able to present the information here. And let's see.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions, so whenever you want to, we can wrap up.
Okay, very good. So thank you very much for those of you who've attended this session. Hopefully this is giving you some information about using Project for managing your intake of new project requests and the prioritization of those requests, and you have a structure to work with. So we will be covering the other topics of the building blocks in later sessions. Thank you so much for attending this session. If you would like a copy of the slides or other information about Project Server, or about the project portfolio management, or about Sensei Project Solutions, feel free to email us at info@projectsolutions.com. Let me just jump to that here. Senseiprojectsolutions.com. You can also follow us on any of the social medias, which is our Twitter, or we also have the LinkedIn and a Facebook page for you to connect with us those ways as well too. Thank you all so very much for attending the session here. I will leave the slide up here, but otherwise, thank you so much and have a great day.
Great. Thank you so much, Walt.